Good evening, everybody. Hope we're doing fantastically well, and welcome to the latest video on the channel, where we're going to be having a bit of a preview of UCL Fantasy Game Week 1, having a look at the kind of draft I've got at the minute, recommending a few players, different fixtures that we should be targeting. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. It really is appreciated. And I just want to say a big thanks for the previous UCL Fantasy video. It did really well, one of the most viewed on the channel, so I really appreciate that and all support so far. But we'll get into this video. So as you can see beside me here, we've got a bit of a draft that I've put together. I'm not overly happy with it, but I'm just going to discuss a few of the options in here. When I see this team, I'm pretty happy with the defence, and the strikers, the midfield, I'm not convinced by at all. I need to do a bit more work on the midfield, I think. Mount is the one I'm happy with. The others I'm not overly happy with at this point in time. So the structure I've gone for here is the 3 premium strikers, which I think is the optimal strategy for this kind of shorter format, more explosive players in my opinion. And another part of that is I don't see a lot of great midfield options unless you want to go for like Salah, where I can obviously see where you could get an upside there. There's not a huge amount of options in midfield that I see a great amount of value in there. So you might want to change to 2 premium strikers, go for a budget striker next to them and bring a Salah, or upgrade a few more areas. You might even want to go big in defence, but I think this is the optimal way to structure your team. So this is quite likely the way I'm going to be going into game week 1 in this kind of structure of the team. The midfield is quite likely to change, as I mentioned. So we'll just talk about a few points in this team. We'll start at the back. So the kind of thinking I have, and I think it's a good strategy to go forward, is, especially in defence, trying to make as limited transfers as possible. So I'm looking at solid defences who you expect to keep a clean sheet. They've got attacking potential, especially with Trent here. Liverpool might not always keep a clean sheet. Their group isn't too bad. I quite like the first 2 fixtures, especially because they're at home. Then they've got Porto, which isn't too bad a fixture. And then Atletico Madrid, I could still argue Trent can get attacking returns. He could even get a clean sheet in those games because Atletico aren't the most attacking team. So you could easily see like a 1-0 either way in that game, even a 0-0. So he's definitely, as we can see in other fantasy Premier League and other fantasy games, Trent is an excellent option to have. So I think he's one of the first names on the team sheet for me, no matter on the fixture. So alongside that, Chelsea, one of the strongest defences in Europe. So we're doubling up on the defence currently with Mendy and Reece James. You just have a bit of an issue, especially with the outfield players, about the rotation between the league. Reece James, especially for the first week, I'm pretty confident in because he's been suspended for the league fixture. So him against Zenit, you've got a great chance of a clean sheet, even some attacking returns there, and then Mendy alongside him. Chelsea haven't got the worst group. It's arguably this Juventus game, home and away, which is quite difficult, but then you've got Malmo in the middle, which is ridiculously good fixtures for them. And Juventus, I don't think, are as good as they used to be, especially with Ronaldo leaving. Chiesa got injured a week or so ago, so they're sweating on his fitness, and have not been doing very well in the league at all. They lost at Napoli at the weekend, so not great from Juventus at the minute. So I don't think Chelsea would be scared of them. See, there's a risk being away Juventus, they could concede. That's the only fixture really there I'm not concerned about. So then also in defence, I was trying to think of a way to get into the Bayern Munich team in a cheap way. We've got so many assets, Bayern Munich, which I can see being unbelievable assets. Obviously, there's Lewandowski, could be incredible. So it was kind of fancy them in defence as well, and there wasn't a lot of cheap avenues in there. So at the minute I'm on Pavard. This could change, but I'm pretty set on it. He seems to be the first choice right back when he's on form. There's been odd times when he's been off form, when he's been dropped, but I'm quite happy to have him in the team. I fully accept he might not keep a clean sheet against Barca, but I quite fancy Bayern Munich to do one over on Barca and maybe keep a clean sheet. But this game week 2 to 5 is just a great run. Can't ask for much better than that. Bayern Munich are just one of those teams that you just know what to expect from them at this point. They're probably one of the most consistent teams in Europe. especially, well, in the league and the Champions League. So I fully expect, that run of 4 fixtures, I wouldn't expect drop points. Just, they're kind of like a machine, and it just keeps on churning for them. And then we've just got a few other cheaper options at the back. So at the minute, I'm on Diego Carlos for Seville. Decent set of fixtures, not the worst group I've ever seen. I quite like the first fixture, especially. Lille are champions of France, but from what I've seen so far this season, they're not as good as they were last season. Obviously, PSG have gone up a level with Messi, and they've kind of got a point to prove, but I'm not overly convinced by them. Wolfsburg, they can score, but I fancy Seville in that group, especially with their European pedigree, especially in the Europa League. So I'm on him at the minute. And then we've also got Munayin, who's only 5 million. I'm not overly convinced by the Dortmund defence, but when I look at these fixtures, they're pretty favourable, and Munayin can also get attacking returns. So I wouldn't always be backing on the clean sheet for them. Dortmund won 4-3 at the weekend, kind of gives you everything you need to know about them. That they can score lots of goals, but they're not great at the back. So I think that gives us a good link to move on from the defence, which I think looks pretty solid. There's arguments to maybe get a Man United defender in there. That's one of the top ones I considered, because they've got young boys first, as you can see here. They've got a pretty easy group as well, so there's arguments. You might even take Reece James out to put a Man United defender in there because there's a bit of rotation risk, or you might try to find $1 million elsewhere to get a Luke Shaw in for a Pavard. But there's a few options you can make in there. We'll touch on some other options when we get to the fixtures as well. So we jump to the front line, which I'm quite happy with at this point in time. So Haaland, again, similar with Munayin, his fixtures are ridiculously good. Haaland can really just is a machine, isn't he? You can see by this 58% selected by that everyone expects him to score goals. He's just a bit of a revelation at the minute, isn't he? So I can see a lot of goals. I can imagine he would be top goal scorer in the Champions League after the group stage for those fixtures, and I don't expect him to let off, take his foot off the gas, should we say, later on in the competition if he's looking for more goals as well. So I think it's a no-brainer the first game week. The other premiums you could argue about, I personally, sitting on Mbappe for the first week, I think game week 2, I won't be having him in this team. You could argue he's at home against Man City, but I'm not overly convinced. You should probably wait and see how the rest of the team performs, but definitely game week 1 he's in, and then we'll be considering him from then on. I quite like that the actual game week 2 and game week 3 are at home, so you could argue keep him for a game or two, see how it goes, and then maybe take them out for 4 and 5. And then we're on Ronaldo, which probably the least convinced by, because I think if he plays, he's going to be unbelievable. But should I be going for another asset like a Lukaku or a Lewandowski, who's definitely set to start? I'm a bit unconvinced if Ronaldo's going to play the 3 games in a week, playing the 2 Premier League fixtures and then European fixture, especially young boys. I think United could rest a few players and still quite easily win that game. So I'm a bit unconvinced about Ronaldo starting and playing all these fixtures. So he's at least one that I'm convinced by there. But I'm definitely going with this free premium striker setup. That's pretty set in my mind because I don't see much value in this midfield. So, like I mentioned, Lukaku and Lewandowski, there's 2 great options there as well if you were thinking not to go with Ronaldo and you wanted a safer pair of hands, really, like with a Lukaku who's more guaranteed to start, especially Lewandowski. Lewandowski got a slightly difficult fixture, as we've mentioned, with Pavard at Barcelona away, but then the 2 to 4, I should say 2 to 5 fixtures are pretty nice. So that fits in quite well with Mbappe as well. So Mbappe to Lewandowski is quite likely a switch that I could do in game week 2. That's the current plan, depending on form and how the teams look in the first game week. But then midfield, midfield has no value at all, in my opinion. That's why I've gone for 2 cheap midfielders currently. The structure of my midfield might change a bit. Mount is the only nailed one there for me at the minute. He didn't play the weekend for Chelsea, so he's pretty guaranteed to start against Zenit. I'd be very surprised if he didn't. Bamba, I've been doing a bit of research on him. he's going to be the first one out of the team. Doesn't seem to be getting a lot of game time. Doesn't look like a good asset to start with. There's some better assets that are mine up. For example, Gonçalves from Sporting is a decent shout. He seems to be involved in a lot of their attacking play for Sporting. Sporting don't have the worst group. And I'm also a bit unsure on Wijnaldum here. He's a great asset when he plays, especially against Bruges. I feel like I might take a shout on him to play against Bruges, but there's the rotational chance. They've got so many midfielders, PSG, that you're just not guaranteed that it's going to play every game. At the minute with Mbappe, Neymar's injured, Messi's just coming into the team. He's the most nailed attacker really for me, Mbappe, but the midfield is a bit of a minefield, so Bamba's definitely going. Wijnaldum may go as well, and we may downgrade Bamba and get some other options in for these cheaper players down here. But yeah, the bench is just all cheap at the minute, which I'm slightly concerned about, except for Munayin, who's a decent option. But as I mentioned on the previous video, there's some different rules to your traditional fantasy, especially around the substitutions, which I'm going to touch on now. So you can see here that the players in the game week either play on the 14th, which is a Tuesday, or the 15th, which is the Wednesday. So you need to play all your players who are playing on a Tuesday on the 14th from the start of the game week. If you don't do that, keep them on your bench, then you're basically missing out on their points. So you can see how your game week 1 players on the 14th perform. So if we use Pavard, for example, if Pavard got 6 points, you're very happy with that. Don't need to do anything, just leave him there. If Pavard doesn't play, get 0 points, or you're not happy with his points total, you can manually substitute him out. For example, Munayin. So if Pavard had 2 points, you can sub him out. You'd lose those 2 points, but then you've got Munayin coming in the day after, and you will get his points. That is also exactly the same for the captain. So if you captained Ronaldo, he didn't play, so he had 0. You could move it to Mbappe the day after, and you would get his captaincy points. So it basically gives you 2 chances to get the right captain. Obviously, if Ronaldo scores a hat-trick, you're pretty likely to stay with him, but it's about taking that risk. So, for example, if Ronaldo got 5 points, he got the 90 minutes and then got an assist, you might be on the fence if you should change it or not, because you will lose those 5 extra points of the captaincy if you go to Mbappe and then he only gets 2. So you'd actually be down by 3 points. So it's, depending on how your first captain does, it can be a bit of a gamble, but that's how you want to play the game, especially if someone blanks, gets a 2 or a 1, or doesn't even play, then it's quite an obvious captaincy change. So that's definitely a slight tweak you need to look out for there. So we'll just do a bit of a review of the fixtures for game week 1. So we've touched on the Seville game. I'm quite confident Seville are going to do well in the tournament. It's a great fixture for them, first up against Salzburg. I've currently got Diego Carlos. I've got the eye on a few other Seville players, especially midfield. I've been looking at Sozo, who plays wide midfield. There's an argument for Rakitic. I'm not overly convinced by Rakitic. I'm not sure he's going to be playing every single game, but he seems to be on penalties when he does play. So that's one to watch out for. There's a few decent options from Seville. Good one throughout the tournament. If you want some cheap assets to play the whole tournament, the whole group stage, decent shout on Seville's assets. We've touched on Man United. Man United have got a great group as well. Young boys are the whipping boys in that group. Sorry for the pun right there. But United definitely could get a few in there. I mentioned obviously Ronaldo in the team. Luke Shaw's a great one to go for. Outside of that, he could go for a Bruno, but I think that midfield, you don't want to be investing that much in there. Benfica's not a bad shout for this game week. It's going to be, they're probably fighting it out in that group to either get Europa League or maybe just push for second. I wouldn't be overly tagged in that fixture because, especially because Dynamo are at home, I think they could cancel each other out. We haven't touched on Atlanta. Atlanta are a very attacking side, and I'd say Villarreal are a very defensive side. So again, these could very well kind of blank each other out, match each other up quite a lot here. But if I was going for either side, I'd be going for some Atlanta assets. I particularly like their fullbacks. We've got Myler and Goossens, who we saw star in the Euros as well. They've also got like Ilicic, who's done very well in the past, and both of their strikers, depending if you can get who's going to play between Muriel and I think it's Muriel and Zapata. Please correct me if I'm wrong there, but if you get the right striker who's on form at the right time, that's a decent little shout there as well. So they're in United's group, but they've also got young boys in that group, so you've always got that young boys fixture to target at one point. There's quite a few teams that you should be looking to target, especially like young boys. Malamo is another one, and then there is Sheriff. Sheriff is that big one for me, I think. Sheriff, the first time in the Champions League, I just think it's going to be a bit of a scary experience for them. I'm slightly inclined to even bring a cheap Shakhtar Donetsk player in there just to utilise that fixture. But you never know, Sheriff playing the first game, especially because it's at home, could put up a shock there. So back up to these, we've kind of mentioned both of these fixtures. That Lille-Wolfsburg group is a pretty open group, as I've kind of touched on before. So there should be a few cheap gems you get in there. I was originally looking in the midfield at Lille, but I'm not overly convinced by them. If you can find a cheap defender or midfielder, a decent option, but I wouldn't be going further than one asset there. I think it's the Wolfsburg striker who's a decent option to have. He's nets a few goals. I think, is it Workhorst? I couldn't think of his name first there, but could be looking at him if you want to go for those two expensive strikers and one cheap striker. He's a decent option to go for there, because there isn't a lot of strikers that are really cheap that offer good value, so he's definitely one of them. We've touched on Dortmund, we've touched on Sheriff, I think we've touched on Liverpool as well. Atletico Madrid, they're a good one to target for defence. Oblak at 7.5, I believe he is a very good option. Not 7.5. Is he 7? Let me have a look what Oblak is. Not 7.5, totally wrong price in there. I think it might be 5.5 or 6. Let's have a look what Oblak is. Let's have a look at the Atletico Madrid defenders in general. That's it, 6.5. Yeah, so that's why I kind of edged towards Mendy, because he's that 0.5 cheaper, and I think Chelsea are probably slightly better than Atletico in defence. But I could put arguments up for Kieran Trippier there as a right wing back. Is a great option there. If you go in Atletico, you've got to go for their defence. Quite a few options in there. I quite like Inter. After this first run of fixtures, we've got some definitely winnable fixtures, especially Dumfries at right wing back. I think defence is probably where I'd be going with them. Even Handanovic is decent value. Man City very much like FPL, if you all play FPL as well. But I just don't know which City player to pick, so it's an avoid for me for Leipzig and when they play PSG as well. Maybe I'll take a punt on when they play Club Bruges to get a player in, but at the minute it's an avoid for me. We've touched on PSG. Club Bruges is another one to target. I can't see them doing much in that group. Even Leipzig playing them is a decent fixture for them. And I quite like Sporting Ajax. I can see a few goals in there. Some decent options from Ajax. You've got Tadic, Haller up front. You've got Klaassen, even Gravenberch in midfield. I think Sporting is just Gavin Caldes. Gav Caldes. I can't even say his name there. You'll have to excuse me for that one. I'll even get you up on the screen just so you can't say I'm making up someone's name there. Gancalves, I'm pretty sure that's kind of how you say it. Butchering the pronunciation there. Yeah, there you go, Gancalves. Not too far. He's 8 million, which is quite steep though, so I'm on the fence with that one. But yeah, that midfield is very tricky in midfield, I'm not going to lie. There's very little value in there. I think midfield, if you're going for some cheaper options, it's definitely in midfield, as you can see with my two very cheap options on the bench here, and then trying to maximise the defence and forwards. So I think as we go throughout the game weeks, that midfield will be having the eye test and seeing how the stats back up the midfielders and seeing what value we can jump on throughout of it. But I think that gives you a good little roundup of that there, guys. But if you've got any comments, if you've got any questions about your team, any transfer dilemmas, please put your comments down below or contact me on Twitter or anything. because I'll be more than happy to help. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, please make sure you subscribe and like the content if you're enjoying it so far, and make sure you check us out over on Twitch and Twitter, as I've just mentioned, and we stream it live on Twitch. So we will actually are looking at doing a live watch along for the Champions League on the Wednesday. So make sure you check us out on Twitch for that. The links will be in the description below. But for this video, guys, I appreciate you all, and we will see you on the next one. Have a good evening.